The day was April 22, 2023. After Gus had been kidnapped, and Toby had been attacked by the anarchists, Toby was forced to hide in the lab. As he did, he recognized the effects of electrolysis on the water from what Gus had done, and what he saw was incredible. From May 7th to May 8th, Toby sat on the plane, thinking about the water at Freedom Miller High. He regretted not bringing it up to the Archbishop, but now Toby had a spark of motivation to continue his research. Mr. Dominus had forced Barrington to temporarily suspend all activities at the Miller Freedom High Laboratory, but Toby decided he was ready to continue once more. Anything to get away from the Novus Ordo Seclorum, and to even maintain separation from Gus for the time being. He couldn't bear to continue being a babysitter for Gus, but he still wished him the best. When the plane ride ended, Toby composed and sent an email to Mayor Barrington, asking to cease the suspension on the lab and to get new equipment. The only good thing that came out of Gus's mission to electrolyze the Freedom Miller water was that Toby now knew for sure that it was safe to do. He always had doubts about electrolysis when it came to that water, afraid it was unsafe and could cause problems. It did cause an explosion when the electrolyzed water was shot, but as long as Toby had good equipment for the job, electrolysis was possible. On May 9th, Toby returned to the lab to find it good as new. The damage done to it had been reversed, and now the lab looked like it had never even been touched before, and just in 2 days. Proper electrolysis equipment was set up for Toby and laid out on a table. Jugs of water were set out and everything was ready. Except for one thing. Mr. Dominus clearly knew something that Toby didn't, because when he sent Gus to split the chemicals from the water, the method he used was certainly unorthodox. Scientifically, Toby adjusted the equipment to mimic Gus's experiment, and all was good to go. He wore a hazmat suit that Barrington's men had provided and got to work. Toby first started electrolysis with a smaller sample of water, then moved on to a larger amount. He began thinking of names for the new element, and then he remembered Barrington's suggestion to call it Tobonium, which made Toby chuckle for the first time in weeks. The substance which came out of electrolysis was a grayish-white, like winter snow, which fit with Toby's last name, but he still failed to come up with anything. After a few hours of repeating the same process, Toby had a flask which was about a fourth of the way filled with the element. The yield wasn't very substantial, as it was barely visible in the water, but enough was in it to make a difference to the taste. Toby wondered if the water was explosive, or just the element when separated. Either way, Toby realized he was in possession of an explosive substance, which he knew he could potentially use to defeat the Novus Ordo Seclorum. Toby put a cap on the flask and exited the empty school. He made his way to the city hall, where he found Barrington sitting in his office. "Hello, sir," Toby said. "It's nice to see you, Mr. Winters," Barrington said. "Have you found anything?" Toby reached into a backpack and pulled out the flask. After separating the water and the element, this is what came out of it. Toby handed the flask to Barrington and he examined it closely for a few moments. "Excellent. Have you noticed anything in particular about the element?" "It looks like unhardened clay, but it is very explosive," Toby replied. "Can you run some tests on it?" "Tomorrow." "Of course," the mayor requested. Toby nodded and exited the room with the flask. He drove home in his car and rested until the next day. Toby walked from his apartment to his car. He was fairly paranoid, so he looked around. He looked to the sky and saw the unmistakable figure of Bloodshot standing atop the apartment. Bloodshot darted away, but it was too late. "Bloodshot!" Toby shouted. Bloodshot slowly moved back into view of Toby, who was very confused. "Are you spying on me?" Toby asked furiously. Bloodshot disappeared again, and Toby waited as Bloodshot climbed down from the apartment building. Bloodshot appeared in front of Toby, who had some questions. "So you're spying on me?" Toby assumed. "I'm spying on the Novus Ordo Seclorum for the anarchists, and also for my own personal benefit," Bloodshot replied. Toby was about to tell Bloodshot to piss off, until he saw Bloodshot's gun barely showing from his waistband, and he had an idea. "Bloodshot, would you be willing to do me a favor?" Toby asked. "I don't do favors. I can exchange information on the Novus Ordo Seclorum," Toby offered. Bloodshot scratched his head and pondered on this for a moment. "What's the favor?" "The NOS suspended my use of guns for a month after a certain altercation in Ireland, and I need a gun for a science experiment," Toby explained. Bloodshot nodded and shook Toby's hand. The two reluctant allies went into Freedom Miller High whilst the students were in their classes, and they made their way into the lab. Once they were in, Toby grabbed his flask of the new substance and put on rubber gloves. He grabbed a small speck of the white clay-like substance and showed it to Bloodshot. "This is what caused the explosion before, but in a much smaller dose," Toby explained. "You have incredible accuracy, right, Bloodshot?" Bloodshot nodded. "So if I throw it into the air and you shoot it, you won't miss?" Toby asked. "Won't the students hear the gunshot and explosion?" Bloodshot asked. "No. The former mayor assured me that no matter how much noise I make, the students won't hear a thing," Toby said reassuringly. "I'd also prefer if you used a silencer, anyway, if you have one." "I can do it," Bloodshot confirmed. Toby and Bloodshot walked back into the farthest section of the lab, and prepared for the experiment. Bloodshot cocked his gun and attached a silencer as Toby put on a hazmat suit. "Okay, ready?" Toby asked, his voice slightly muffled by the suit. Bloodshot nodded. 3, 2, 1. Toby threw the substance out in front of him, and the silent pew came from the silencer pistol and the bullet connected with the white substance, causing an explosion. An extremely large explosion, at that. The explosion sent Toby onto the ground, and even Bloodshot, who was a lengthy distance from the explosion, was sent back. Tables were broken and walls were damaged. Most notable was the wall closest to the explosion, which revealed something incredible. Bloodshot got up and walked over to Toby, whose hazmat suit had a massive chunk taken out of it, and even had some of his clothing destroyed. He had small burns on the left side of his body and he was in a lot of pain. "You're the most idiotic scientist I've ever met," Bloodshot said insultingly. "Oh my God," Toby groaned. Toby looked to his left and saw a large hole in the wall, which exposed a bunker with paper and weaponry on the walls. "Look," Toby said, pointing to the bunker. Bloodshot instantly forgot about tending to Toby's injuries and crawled through the hole. Toby slowly got up and followed after him. On the walls were papers with thumbtacks and string connecting pictures of people. A few pictures depicted people such as politicians, rich families such as the DuPonts, Archbishop Miller, and Mr. Dominus. All of the pictures connected to Mr. Dominus, who was connected to a picture labeled NOS. A notebook was laid out on a table along with pistols, AK-47s, and grenades. Toby grabbed the notebook and flipped through the pages. It mostly seemed like a notebook, written by Mayor Thomas Clark, which just seemed like a way for him to write his thoughts out. Just politics and personal stuff like that. Until the last entry, April 3, 2023, the day before the terrorist attack of April 4, which read, "Today is my last day. There's nothing I can do to stop them. Holy shit," Bloodshot said as he looked at the page with Toby. He knew he was going to die, Toby said. Bloodshot then looked back to the wall of papers. He took out his phone and took a picture. "Hey Toby, about our deal to exchange favors. I think this is all the information I need on the Novus Ordo Seclorum," Bloodshot said. "Yeah," Toby agreed. Toby had a feeling nobody was supposed to see that. Before the lab was expanded by Barrington, the bunker would have been even further away from the lab. Toby wondered how Clark would have gotten in, so he looked up and saw a handle which opened a small door. "I'm telling Barrington about this," Toby declared. "No, cover it up. We can defeat the Novus Ordo Seclorum on our own," Bloodshot demanded. Barrington was his vice mayor, he should know. Toby argued. "Fine, but I'm going to take down the NOS on my own. I'll help. We can use the explosives," Toby offered. "Okay, but don't get in my way," Bloodshot said. The two grabbed guns from the bunker and stared at the board of papers together. Then they left, and the two planned an assassination against Mr. Dominus.